What's up, meta nerds? Today I want to talk about some of the worst ways you could die in Star Wars. Let me start by getting the easy ones out of the way first, which is of course lightsabers, force lightning, and getting eaten by something like a Rancor. We all know how a lightsaber works, but hopefully none of us have to know how it feels, because we saw how these things can melt away Durasteel, meaning of course your bones are no problem. And to me, it sounds like it'd be way more painful to have my bone melted than say if it were just cut in half by one of our many earth weapons. Force lightning is of course a terrible way to go, but it's not completely unlike anything we have on Earth. Think of force lightning as the bastard child of the electric chair and a taser. A terrible way to go, but definitely not something that's exclusive to Star Wars. And in that same vein, I want to talk about monsters like the Rancor. Rancors only exist in Star Wars, I hope, but the idea of having your bones crushed inside the mouth of some large animal while you're still alive is readily available on our planet in the form of a hippo or a lion or an alligator or a crocodile, or you get my point. So the rest of these things I'm going to mention are all particularly brutal ways to die that can only happen to a person if they find themselves in a galaxy far, far away. Let's start it off with brainworms. This 1.5 foot long green parasite hails from the planet Geonosis, and the way it works is that it like to crawl into your mouth or nose and extend little feelers that would attach themselves to the host's brain. These worms were telepathically connected with the Geonosian Queen, and so its victims had to not only deal with the physical trauma of having their head burrowed into by this worm, but if any fragment of yourself was still left in that body. Imagine the psychological pain that would come with being a passive observer to your own actions, not being able to stop yourself from killing your friends and fellow troopers. And although a brainworm can be removed if you just expose the host body to cold temperatures, if left untreated, the brainworm would continue to feed off your tissue, and thus you would slowly die over time, upon which the brainworm would then find its next victim. And while we're talking about the potential for a slow, painful death, let's talk about carbonite freezing. Even if you survive, you can still suffer from something called hibernation sickness, which left the victim extremely weak and temporarily blind. If something goes wrong, then you won't be preserved, you'll simply be frozen to death. Soon as these jets start firing, all of your bodily processes are supposed to end right away. That way you don't have that automatic response you get when you fall in cold water, which makes you gasp for air. The Alderaan Medical Association has already determined that just being around carbon freezing smoke was a health risk. But if your body wasn't frozen fast enough, and it had that automatic reaction to the cold sensation, the person would gasp, taking in a large gulp of this cold smoke, which would start to freeze the water in the lungs. Being frozen from the inside out is definitely a terrifying way to go. Next up is Darth Nihilus, also known as the Lord of Hunger. Nihilus is said to be hands down the strongest user of the ability called Force Drain. Force Drain works a lot like how it sounds, and it drains your victim of all of its force energy, including the living force, which is what set apart living and non-living things. Darth Nihilus had grown to be so powerful in this Force Drain ability that the Lord of Hunger once devoured an entire planet. From aboard his ship the Ravager, Nihilus looked upon the planet Qatar. It said that although the beings had no warning of this attack, the entire planet simultaneously heard a terrifying scream, a cry from the dark side of the Force itself. All Jedi, sentient beings, animals, plants, anything that had the living force inside of it, slowly felt their life energy leaving their body. Imagine going about your regular day, and then out of nowhere, a disembodied, blood-curdling scream pierces your mind. And as you look around, you realize that everyone else is just as terrified as you are. And as you try and hold on to your strength and stay conscious, the last thing you experience is panic and confusion as to who or what could be doing this to you. It may not be the most physically painful way to die, but I think there's something uniquely disturbing and personal about the way that Darth Nihilus can drain your life energy to turn you into inanimate matter with such casual callousness, while leaving you completely unaware to what it is that's killing you and everything around you. Now next I want to talk about Sith sorcery and the essence transfer, but I want to give an honorable mention to the Sarlacc and dying from the phantom energy fired from Starkiller Base. Death by Sarlacc was pretty terrifying, because when you fell into its mouth, it didn't just chew you up into little pieces. Instead, you were swallowed whole, and little feelers and tentacles inside of the stomach would puncture the victim's skin and inject them with a neurotoxin, which would completely immobilize them, but also aggravate every nerve in the body, causing what might have been as much pain as physically possible, all while the body laid in acidic fluids in the stomach, which would slowly burn away at the body, making it so the Sarlacc digested its victims for millennia. And as for Starkiller Base, once this beam of phantom energy actually hit you, you probably didn't feel much. But just the fact that this beam of energy moves so much slower than the beam fired from the Death Star. Unlike the victims on Alderaan, the beings that found themselves on the Hosnian system during this event had to watch this red beam of death crawl towards them, giving them just enough time to realize that everyone that they know and loved on this planet was about to be incinerated. Sith magic or Sith sorcery could take advantage of some of the most depraved parts of the dark side of the Force. I'm going to look at Darth Bane's apprentice Darth Zana, one of the strongest practitioners of Sith magic. Let me just start by reading a quote from her. "I can use my powers to conjure up your worst nightmares and bring them to life before your eyes. I can drive you mad with fear, shred your sanity, and leave you a raving lunatic for the rest of your life." Her ability to infiltrate her victims' minds was truly terrifying. By making people feel like they had just been transported to some sort of hellscape, they would fight off all manner of demons that weren't actually there. Zana could leave a person in this mental state for the rest of their lives, making it so that a person could feel so terrified and actually sense creatures tearing their body apart that they could go into shock or suffer from seizures, real physical symptoms brought on by a hallucination. Some victims might accidentally kill themselves while trying to flee from these visions, while others would purposefully commit suicide just to make it all stop. Another one of her terrifying abilities was to use this magic to conjure up dark side tendrils, physical manifestations of the dark side of the Force, which could reach out like a hand made from black mist and rip apart a victim's flesh and even their bones. Being the victim of a powerful attack from Sith magic is probably one of the most horrifying ways to die in the Star Wars galaxy. But I also think that the fragmented psychological state, which could be created by performing an essence transfer, is also worth mentioning before I end this video. Although it could be used to put your soul into inanimate objects, like Exar Kun did with the temples on Yavin 4, this made you immortal as some sort of Force ghost, which isn't really that bad of a deal. But what terrifies me is what Darth Bane tried to do, transferring your consciousness to another living being. He tried to do this on the Sith that we just talked about, Darth Zana, and although she was able to stop him from completely taking over her mind, some of Darth Bane's consciousness still intermingled with that of Zana's. This is kind of terrifying for both of them, because for the rest of her life, Bane was worming his way around her mind, and although Zana was mostly in control of her body, it had to be utterly disturbing to know that some of your actions weren't even caused by you, but rather your old master, who was always fighting to overtake your consciousness. Well, that's it for my list of the scariest ways to die in Star Wars, but this is definitely not a complete list, and a lot of this stuff is just my opinion. I would love to hear what you guys think is the worst way to die in Star Wars in the comments down below. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button, and be sure to leave a comment down below if I missed any cool facts, or if you have a suggestion for future videos. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MetaNerdsLore, so you can see us build Star Wars props and cosplays, along with some other cool Star Wars stuff. If you want to help support this channel, check out the description below for our Amazon store and our Patreon, and be sure to subscribe, because we're making videos like this every single day. But more important than all that, remember, when compared to Star Wars, our galaxy isn't that bad, and the Force will be with you. Always.